Welcome to this week's edition of More Insights and Strategy, the Enterprise App Podcast. We're on episode 4, I believe. We're not sure yet, but we're getting started with this really cool new podcast. I'm Robert Kramer, joined with Melody Brue, and we're both VP and Principal Analysts at More Insights, and I handle ERP enterprise data. Mel handles modern work and HCM and CX. So on this show, we talk about different tools and trends and trajectories and people and marketing technologies, enterprise apps, ERP, CRM. And really, we keep on coming back to the same thing, which is the glue that holds it together is data. So, Mel, we got a cool show that we're going to talk this week about Zoom, IBM, ServiceNow, Microsoft, and what's coming up. I know you have some travel and just came off of a really cool trip as well. But let me just go through this quick disclaimer. Hopefully, I get it right. This show is for information and entertainment purposes only. While we will discuss publicly traded companies on this show, its content should not be taken as investment advice. But let's get started, Mel. I think we want to start with Zoom and what's going on with them.
So really interesting and kind of, I would say, a little bit surprising, not actually necessarily surprising to me because I spend a lot of time with Zoom. I've been to many of their analyst events as well as their Zoomtopia, which is their customer event. And I know kind of where their kind of AI posture is, and they're actually quite strong in their AI research and what they're doing in AI. I actually just published an article about what they're doing in AI in healthcare, but they just had a really great discovery in AI efficiency called chain of draft, COD. And it was developed by some Zoom researchers. So it focuses on generating this like more concise step-by-step reasoning in AI. So it reduces the amount of text used. So it does this by instructing the LLM to produce like these short reasoning steps, which cuts the token. I'm having trouble with my words today. The token usage. So it simplifies the prompting. So like rather, it's kind of like models the way that people think, thinking like step by step, but keeping it like maximum of 5 words per step. But it doesn't actually necessitate any model modifications. So it reduces token usage, meaning like the token consumption, they say up to 93% in some tasks. So that obviously translates to lower cost, lower latency, between like 50 and 75% because of the generation of fewer tokens. And so that cost efficiency. So if you think about, everybody's talking about, and we've talked about this multiple times, AI pricing.
Yep.
Nobody's really figured out how to price AI, and much of it is because of this. Nobody knows like what is going to the token usage, how much is like any inquiry going to produce in terms of the token usage, how much of the is it going to require like a more sophisticated model, a less sophisticated model. This federated approach to AI that Zoom uses, they can then kind of choose from the models. Box had their earnings yesterday, and they of course talked about the pricing, and they're using kind of these I forget what they called it, but it's like AI, like they're kind of pricing it like in tokens essentially. But it allows people to kind of look at optimizing the AI performance, but also reducing the resource consumption. So it's really like, I think the resource consumption is really important, and we've talked about that, with data centers. But it allows for, I think, more predictability for customers to kind of think about how the pricing is going to work, what their cost is going to be. But I don't know exactly yet how Zoom is going to integrate this into their pricing and their AI usage, because a lot of what Zoom gives for their customers, they actually don't charge extra for their AI. this actually gives them a lot of efficiencies for it doesn't cost them extra to give that AI away for free, right?
Right.
Um, but I think, for me, I think this is like another proof point for them that they really are leading in that space. I've often said that they don't tout that enough, that you wouldn't think a company that's kind of known for their video services, they're really trying to get out of that, but that's what they're known for. Um, that you wouldn't think of them as being leading research in AI, would you? Do you?
Well, I wouldn't. I actually love their their application. I think it's the UI is probably one of the best of that competitive landscape there. But do you think that AI is a critical part of that industry?
Absolutely. It's becoming more and more so as voice has gotten integrated into like the AI kind of the data, right? So data was voice was such a like a unused data source. And now people can take that unstructured data and really structure it with the use of AI. And that's helping sales teams, it's helping CX teams, it's helping to really like kind of mine all of that unstructured data and get the use out of it. So companies like Zoom, RingCentral, WebEx, they're finding so much value in voice combined with all those other channels to get more value out of unified communications.
And then one thing, like you mentioned, the pricing for AI, I think that that's super important for all industries to get that down because I think companies need to understand, is AI a positive, on ROI or not? So
Right.
I think that that's coming to a point where what's the best way to price it? Is a price, or does it need to be non chargeable because that's just the nature of innovation for that release or that type of software?
Yeah. And I think that eventually we're going to see AI sort of, disappear into the background and we're going to talk less about it and the pricing is going to change. And as the models become less expensive, it might just become built into the price the way that Microsoft and Google have moved towards. But Salesforce is they've actually kind of settled on some pricing at least temporarily, and that's kind of let's move to our next topic, which is Salesforce Agent 2dx. They've announced their latest version of their digital labor platform for AI agents just today, or
Mhm. Yep.
um, when this airs officially, it might be yesterday. Who knows? But it really, this expands their AI agent capabilities to work proactively behind the scenes. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, which is like it may disappear into the background. In their case, they have talked about the pricing. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on this new release of 2DX?
I mean, I think it's great to be able to have the agents work, autonomously behind the scenes to help out with business processes, and also to be able to customize your own for that sake of what that company requirements are. So, from that perspective, I think it's great. I'm not certain if companies have the data at a standpoint where they're able to exercise a lot of these features, but I think the features that are there are probably apropos for where things are at from an innovation perspective for Salesforce. I also think there's some really neat things that they're doing to monitor the agents, which I think is pretty interesting to know if they're performing at the level that you want, to actually monitor them, to see if they're effective or not. So I think
Hmm.
that is actually a pretty interesting feature to see behind the scenes, because I think trust is a big deal for some of these companies. How do I know that what the agents are doing is what I would want them to do, even though I'm told that that's what they're going to do, these mundane tasks, they're going to help the humans, do their job better, and then the
Right.
humans work on the strategy. But what do you think about those comments?
Yeah, I think this is the first time that they've really said like this doesn't require a human in the loop. And I think that's been the thing that keeps people kind of comfortable with the use of AI, which is that there's going to be this human oversight. So, they say that this integrates with with companies' existing data systems, with their business logic. I think you're right, right? Like, is the data ready for that? Is the data in place, to do that? And I think, a lot of times the content management in companies isn't quite there in order for the data to even be right. So even if the data systems are in place, think about the number of times you have drafts of something and those old drafts don't get deleted if your policies aren't updated. So this relies on such like pristine data management, data hygiene, if you will,
Point.
for these things to work autonomously without any failures. Um, if all of that can, AI can help with that eventually. I'm not sure that we're there yet. But I think this is an interesting step. And I do think that, some of the developer tools and analytics, like the low code and low code to pro code tools, where they can configure, test, and deploy. And then, like you said, the advanced analytics for monitoring and optimizing the agent performance. That does help with kind of giving a little bit more confidence into the agent performance. It's just like, doing a review on an employee. You kind of stop and see how's it doing. I think that part of it, interestingly, goes back to my question on like who monitors these or who manages these agents, this digital workforce. Is this an HR function? Is it an IT function? Who, if there are thousands of them, who's in charge of them? Does this become like this workforce that, like, they're talking to each other, they're they're working things out, they're negotiating on the back end? Who's managing this? So
That's a super good point. At the same time, I think the companies feel they have to innovate because the technology is there. So I don't think the intersection has happened yet. But
yeah.
I think it's getting there. But when you go into that, then we kind of go into talk a little bit about IBM. Every company the is going to the point where they're always innovating, bringing in new technology. We said build, buy, or partner. Those are some certain things that you do nowadays. But we're seeing the buy and the partner more aggressive. Although we just came off of Salesforce, and that's the build. But you can't afford not to be growing from an innovation standpoint, from the vendor perspective, and the adoption perspective from the customer. What's the cost of doing nothing?
Right.
And I think that's a big key. That what are you getting out of it by staying stagnant? Do you think you're winning or losing? And does that come back to change management? I know I'm going to talk about IBM in a second, but it's kind of an interesting subject because I think that all this technology is there, and what happens if you don't use it?
Yeah. I think one last thing on this, you mentioned just, building, partnering, all of that. One thing that they also announced is their agent exchange marketplace, and that allows partners to list and sell their components. So I think it's built basically into Salesforce for Agentforce components. So using templates and actions for, I think, 200 initial partners. So this allows partners to list and sell their components, and they're calling it a $6 trillion digital labor market. So
Wow, I
there
think
we
that's
go. I mean,
really
they have
key.
some interesting use cases of like OpenTable reports that Agentforce is managing 73% of their restaurant web inquiries. They've got, you know, examples in manufacturing, recruitment, staffing, travel, tourism, all of that. But yeah, let's move on to IBM and their acquisition of DataStax.
This kind of comes back to what we were just talking about with companies that are having trouble or not wanting to adopt technology. And I think that that's one of the things. How the companies that have the technology grow to make it easier on their customers. And this is one of those acquisitions of DataStax that IBM sees that there's trouble with their customers adopting AI. And by acquiring DataStax, it gives them more functionality to have access to unstructured data. And that's really a big thing. And you talked a little bit about unstructured data with Salesforce and having access to some of those files. But this brings what DataStax has, which is a NoSQL and vector database technology, into IBM Watson. And it's to the point where they're trying to help their customers, solve some of these data problems. Because if you look at a lot of the companies that we talk about, their goal was to bring better data or to solve the data problems that their customers have so they can actually access the files that they need and have the correct information to be successful. When you go back to some of the companies we worked at in the past, I mean, data wasn't as pronounced as is the biggest deal because of the fact it was just, we took our data and we just thought it was good. If it wasn't good, we complained about it. But nowadays it is the fuel for AI. It's the fuel for how do you become, more operational and be able to use innovations like AI and then AI agents. And now, a lot of these autonomous opportunities that are available with AI. So this is a big move for IBM. They've been acquiring companies and trying to improve their AI and data management strategy for really the last year or so. What are your thoughts?
I really like, how IBM in multiple different verticals is helping the um, the adoption of AI. They're not just, kind of focusing on what they do with AI, but they're focusing on helping companies to get the most out of generative AI, their AI capabilities. I see this with what they're doing in HCM. We saw it in what they're doing in sports. They're especially in their consulting practice, just really how they're helping on the adoption curve and accelerating kind of that time to value for companies.
Yes. Yeah, and they have obviously a fantastic reputation. So I think they have the trust of their customers, and then bringing on companies like this DataStax company who has a lot of great technology. I think it gives the customer more, I guess, opportunity to understand what AI can do for them and how they can be successful with it because a company of IBM is actually promoting it. I think it goes a long way. But um, IBM is still kind of putting a lot of those things together with that full AI stack that they can give the customers. Because I still think there's a out there the belief from companies that AI isn't necessarily able to be absorbed by certain companies and be successful. And that's what we said about the ROI on that. And then the pricing's not necessarily there. I don't think the intersection has necessarily happened yet. But what do you think needs to happen for AI to be successful in some of these companies?
I have often said that I think that the big barriers are cost and adoption.
Mhm.
And I think, the getting the pricing right, or at least getting it right for now. It doesn't have to be right forever. Um, it just has to be where customers can understand it, they can plan for it, and it can be somewhat consistent for just their kind of planning purposes. And then adoption is people need to see some ROI immediately, and they need to get it in people's hands.
Right.
And it, doing something is better than doing nothing. So starting out simple, just getting your hands on it, I mean, I think, we talked about this when Microsoft changed their pricing, Google the same, like get it in people's hands, because especially, with tools like Gemini and in, the tools you're going to use every day, get people using it because they'll see the value. and then they'll be more willing to try other tools. So I think those are really the big things on adoption. I also think that industry wide, sorry, vertical wise, if you look at industries that are more likely to adopt it, think of, healthcare, HR, places that are very system focused, highly educated, highly trained individuals that are used to, they have to do things a very specific way. And those are going to be the people who are more likely to be willing to adopt something like AI that may be scary to others. Maybe like they don't, people, the change management is like they don't want to do it. But these people are used to systems. They're used to, kind of following rules in a particular order. And these are also areas that you kind of can see the immediate value. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. And the things that I've seen, with multiple vendors. But I don't know. What do you think?
No, I mean,
Agree?
it's great.
Disagree?
I think we're a little bit further away from AI adoption than I think is out there in the media. I think the reality is that there's a data readiness problem, there's a change management problem. There's, like you mentioned about the industry specifics. I think that one size doesn't fit all. I think that's a big problem. And then on top of that, I think there's an innovation, aptitude component, which shows like what the level of potential innovation a certain company has, no matter what the size.
Right.
Smaller ones are all over it, and the bigger ones may be like, there's no way I'm disrupting my company. But I think that the level of fear is told higher, but not as high as the reality is, because you're always fearful of things that are change, and it's not as bad as you think it is, but you have to do it. I mean, if you had your own company and it was say a distribution company or a manufacturing company, would you be all over the technology, or do you want to be the second wave or the third wave? But I think the cost factor that you bring up on a you know regular basis, I think is would be the key that I would be looking at. Like, I want to know, does this benefit my company? Show me. And if I don't understand the cost for using AI, not necessarily the benefit of using it, but the cost to use it, I need to
Hmm.
know that, because I don't know if I'm making money off of this or not.
Yeah. I think the other thing, well, one other place where I see that there's definitely, a big kind of uptick in usage is developers. I think, and even in the Salesforce um, announcement, they said that 96% of developers believe that AI agents will positively shape the developer experience. I think there's less of a kind of fear there because they can see the code, they can see what's happening. They can test it. That's such a controlled environment for them,
Yep,
and so I think they can see the ROI there. Um,
I agree. But
yeah.
we're seeing it across the board, different situations, but I don't think there's any consistency to say that this is the pricing, here's the outcome, here's by industry. But there's a lot of things going on in a positive direction. And one of the companies that we've talked about a lot is ServiceNow. They have their Now platform, and it's obviously built around AI, and they're focusing now on what they're doing within specific industries with the acquisition of a solution called Quality 360, which is really based on quality control, quality management. And they have a ServiceNow solution that's called Manufacturing Commercial Operations, and it's going to be embedded in there. But it's just another way for them to improve their specific on manufacturing industry, and it takes it all the way from production to service delivery. But there's always quality control issues within, obviously, different companies that have that, like chemical companies, different automotive companies, and all the way through service delivery. So this workflow that they're integrating it a little bit further takes that to a more of a granular level, but it helps get get ahead of the curve. So I think that it gives them, it's really a positive move. It helps them develop that industry specific a little bit more.
I think this is a good acquisition. It surprises me just a little bit that this isn't something that ServiceNow already has in their capabilities. Is it just something that's like it's an add-on that just sort of um like accentuates their capabilities? How much of a differentiator is it to what they're already capable of?
Well, they already have a solution that's manufacturing commercial operations, and I believe they already have a quality control in there. It takes it to a different level, more of a hits more facets of the business, and exemplifies more capabilities that they can do. When you look at ERP vendors and what they're able to do, they have quality control modules in there that monitor the quality of a finished product, quality of production, quality of even service delivery. I think this is really a workflow to take it a little bit further in the solution that they already have, which is the manufacturing commercial operations. That they don't necessarily take it to that granular level, that it gives them more capabilities. It's more to help manage the supply chain complexities and to maintain a higher quality control over what they're doing from an operational perspective, and that level that they don't currently have.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to be able to analyze and detect problems and then find a solution to fix it. And they don't have that specific component in their existing solution that ServiceNow has. And these are great solutions for ServiceNow because they work well with ERP solutions, specifically like SAP and Microsoft and all the other great ones. So this is something that they aren't currently having within the wheelhouse of the ERPs or currently within ServiceNow.
So this makes me think. I wonder if this is. I mean, this was built on ServiceNow.
Yep.
Um, so acquisitions like this make me think. Like, is this a like they just want they want the engineers? Is it an ac, acquihire? Um, and like it's almost like let's take away the competition. Let's get the engineers. Let's strengthen the platform with this. It's like better together, but also let's not let them out on their own. Um, those are good moves, also, but because this seems like something that ServiceNow could definitely do on their own. And it's interesting when things like this happen that where it's actually built on the platform. That makes it a very easy integration into just kind of soak it up under the
Much easier,
yeah.
much easier. But speaking of that, well, you go ahead. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Microsoft first.
Yeah, well, I was going to say you just for our last topic of the day, you just released quite an impressive research paper on Microsoft's autonomous ERP. Tell me about this.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So Microsoft is really moving forward with the branding of their Microsoft Dynamics 365 to be autonomous ERP. And it's I'm obviously biased, but it's a great paper and kind of showing why Microsoft has taken this new approach to ERP, and really talking about how to transition legacy systems a certain way, really at their own pace. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But why autonomous ERP is the new modern ERP, and how they focus on really specific AI built-in processes already into the business, and they're developing more and giving the capability to build your own. But a very strong focus on data management. We talk about that all the time. But coming back to your own pace and change management, they have a built-in process called Fast Track that allows you to um, have your implementation. A certain process and the framework that they use is called success by design, but it promotes effective change management with specific processes. But the AI agents are really going to be more pronounced in this ERP from Microsoft, and more automation, more business processes. And as I talk a lot about in the past about 5.0, Industry 5.0, the collaboration between humans and AI, robots, that collaboration. So it's about how do you change your business um, for the needs that need to be met. And this is one of those applications that has a lot of, I guess, features and functionality to help with those business impact. But I will tell you, it does come back to the data. It comes back to getting your processes correct, and the paper really lines up what the vision is for Microsoft long term with going with this autonomous ERP. But it's a rebrand in a sense as well.
So I thought it was really interesting that the agents learn by analyzing the workflows and suggesting updates to their logic. So they're basically like self learning.
Mhm. Yeah, that is really neat. And why that's good is because like we talked about, there's not one size fits all. So every industry is different. Even if you're in the same industry, you might have a competitive advantage that you do a certain way that you need your own. You need the agents to understand the way that you do business. And so I
Mhm.
think it's a really smart um, strategy, or the way that they built it to do that. Everybody thinks that ERP is so complex, and maybe it is, but this is a way to have it not complex, to have it learn the way that you do business, and then for you to learn the way to do business a little bit better. Like coming back, you can't afford not to modernize, because the cost of not is a loss, because there's other companies that are going to, even though it's a challenge. I think it comes back to, and we talk about this a lot in the paper, is how do you absorb the modernization approach from a transformational perspective to be successful. And I think they lay out a lot of approaches that they have done, Microsoft, that I think that's why it's enunciated pretty uh, severely in this. But one of the things that I laid out in there was a maturity model that kind of talks about how you implement in the phases that you go through, and how to go through it and not feel overwhelmed. And I think Microsoft does a pretty good job of making sure the customer is on track. But I also think that a lot of other ERP vendors do the same thing. So I think that I was actually at an event with Oracle, I think like 2 or 3 weeks back in this company. I think I brought it up during one of our episodes, but they talked about. I asked him why you were so successful. He said because we overinvested in implementation.
Mm.
So I think it's one of those things. And it's just a question back to you: if you were going to implement the new system, would you do it like now, knowing that you had to endure all this, or would you? And I asked you just a little bit of a similar question in this, but would you invest more in implementation? I guess is my question. Do you see that it's a pain in the butt, or something that if I do it right, I'm going to be very successful? Because I think if you do it wrong, and if you look at like Salesforce, if you implement that wrong, it's hard to go
Right.
back and get it right. So the same as with ERP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You have to get it right.
and
And sometimes people think they get it right, and then they don't, they find out down the road that that it's not. Um, well, we are kind of getting to we're over our time actually, but we had a lot to talk about. Um, we have a lot going on over the next couple of weeks and months.
you're traveling
Next,
again.
yeah,
More
next
fun.
week is actually a non-travel week, but then I'm off to Adobe Summit, which I'm excited about. That's always such a good time. And actually, oh no, actually, next week is South by Southwest, and then Adobe Summit, and we have, I think, combined of all the analysts at More Insights and Strategy, we probably have over a dozen different events that we'll be at. So we will link that in our show notes. if anybody is going to be at any of those events, hit us up, because we will. If we're not there, we'll hook you up with one of the analysts that is there, because we always like to meet people in person. And who knows, maybe we'll have a good topic to talk about on one of our podcasts. But for today, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you for joining us. I'm Melody Brue. This is Robert Kramer, and this is the Enterprise App Podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like. Follow us on X. I always say Twitter, but it's X. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.